Okay, good evening, friends. We are continuing our series of trying to understand infinity. In other words, trying to take a little bit of a deeper look at ourselves, at the world, and working out not just what we can see in front of us, but also what is going on a bit behind the scenes. In this particular edition, we are continuing the quest to understand ourselves a bit better, and we're particularly going to focus on what we've called layers of existence. We know we have a body. We also know we have a soul, but there are actually more pieces to us than those two parts. So let's explore those a little bit together. So that'll be basically the game plan today. Is we're gonna begin by Hi Joe. We're gonna begin by looking at a story from the Gemara, which is a very perplexing story. And through that story, we will indeed learn all kinds of very interesting things about ourselves. And if we get time at the end, we'll be able to bring it together with a few other sources. So that's the general overview. In this story, hopefully, we have some old and some new. So let's give it a go. We have here in this first box. Let's see if I can do this. Oh, there you go, guys. We have a very interesting story from the Gemara. So it goes as follows. This is Gemara in Chulin. Reb Pinchas ben Yair, hava ka'azil lepidyon shavuyim. Reb Pinchas ben Yair was one of the great Chachamim, one of the great sages. He was going on a mission of pidyon shavuyim. He was going on a mission to free captives, to free hostages. That's what he was doing. Hagabei begenai Nahara. He encountered a river, which was called Genai. Nahara in Aramaic is river, so it's called the Genai River. So he's going on his journey, and as you can see, I've got some diagrams at the bottom. Those I made up myself. Those are not official Talmudic diagrams. So we have here the Rab Pinchas ben Yair. He's going on this very important mission, and he has a physical obstacle. He has the river, which is blocking his path. So, as I think many of us would do in such a case, we open up a dialogue with the river. That's what Reb Pinchas ben Yair is about to do. So he says, Amarle, he says to the river, Ganai, chalukli memech, split your waters for me. Va'avorbach, so I can go through you, I can traverse you. And then, of course, if that wasn't interesting enough for you, the river replies. And the river says back, Amarle, אתה הולך לעשות רצון קונך, ואני הולך לעשות רצון קוני. He says, actually, why should I give way to you? Because we're both doing something which is the will of God. You're trying to do the will of God. I understand you're going on your way to this very important mitzvah of freeing hostages, extremely important. But God also has a will for me, and the will for me, says the river, is to flow. So why should you take precedence over me? We're both equal in this matter. And so interesting argument by the river. And the river continues. He says, Ata safek ose safek ieta ose. You, Reb Pinchas ben Yair, it's not a certainty that you'll actually achieve your intended goal. Ani varay ose. But I will certainly achieve my intended goal. You're going on this mission, albeit it's important. So on one hand, we're equal. You shouldn't be able to get through me because we're equal, because we're both doing the will of God. On the other hand, we have I, the river, should take precedence over you because I will definitely be able to achieve my goal of flowing. That's something that's very easy for me to do. There's many external factors which could be involved in achieving this goal of freeing the hostages or not. So it's not 100% that even if you try, it's not 100% you'll even be successful. So far, the river is winning. I mean, if I were to judge between the two of them, I would say, okay, so let's keep it flowing. So let's see. Reb Pinchas ben Yair is not going to give up yet. He's going to reply once again to the river, and he's going to say as follows. He says, Amarle, im iata cholek, if you don't split, gozrani alecha shelo yavru bach maim laolam. If you don't split for me now, I am going to decree upon you that you are not going to flow with water ever again. So he's using some kind of different tact over here. The reasoning seems to have gone out the window, and for something more strict or something more blunt is his approach. And if you can believe it, chalakle, And so the river does indeed split. So so it's interesting. It seems like from a perspective of reasoning, the river was really correct, or the river should have really taken precedence. But Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair said this interesting kind of like threat or something to the river, and ultimately he did manage to get through. So we have Branko, do me a favor. I think we're ready to close the door now. Is that okay? Sure. Thank you. So we have a very interesting first part of the story. So there's a few more parts to go. You close out, but open this window first. Okay. Okay. So interesting first part of the story. We have Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, one of the great sages. He's going on a very important mission, of course.
When did he live? Do you know?
I believe he's in the era of the Tanaim, so it's around 1800 years ago. I'm not 100%, meaning that's when the Mishnah was published. So that's the last of the Tanaim, or 1800 years ago, but it could be before. There were Tanaim who lived earlier, so I'm not. So it could be. There were certainly Tanaim who lived like around the time before the destruction of the temple. So that's kind of like 2000 years ago. So it's kind of like 200-year period, I think, somewhere in there. So yeah, that's when he was. But he's in the era of the Talmudic era, basically, or the Mishnah era. Anyway, so this is this conversation. So he has this encounter, he has this conversation with the river, and ultimately he manages to do an unbelievable miracle. By the way, we make such a big deal, right? We make such a big deal. How many times? Here's a quiz. How many times in the Torah, let's say the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, do we have a body of water splitting for human being for miraculous purposes, right? So what do you think?
Twice?
Okay, I hear twice. Anyone from the Zoom, can anyone can name one of the two of those?
When they left Egypt.
When they left Egypt, so that's the one what is easier to get. Plenty of movies been made about that one. So if it wasn't from the Bible, we could get it from there. So yeah, the Exodus from Egypt, the splitting of the sea, the greatest miracle. The Maharal talks about it was really the greatest miracle, even bigger than all the plagues, was the splitting of the sea. So that happened one time, colossal miracle. The second time, everyone else is saying two. When was the other time?
Jordan, when they crossed over.
Yeah, what you say, Yeshua?
Yeah.
Yeah, Yeshua. When they cross, so that one is the Jordan River, right? So is that what you were thinking? Is the second one as well?
I was fuzzy on what it was.
Yeah, but there was. Yeah, so Yeshua. So you have to go beyond the 5 books of Moses to get to Yeshua. But when you do so, so when they entered the land, there was a similar. It's a river this time, as opposed to a kind of a sea, a body of water, which isn't kind of like flowing unidirectionally. So it works a little bit differently in the days of Yeshua. Whereas in the days of Moshe, and Moses in Egypt, it kind of split apart. Whereas in the days of Yeshua, it stopped flowing to the side and started flowing upwards. That's how they describe it in the Tanakh. Very interesting. So maybe that's what happened here, because there's also a river. But we now have a third, so it's interesting. So if someone asks you how many times has a miracle occurred when a sea was split, so we can now say 3. If you read the written Torah, you'll get 2, and if you read here, you'll find another one. And we didn't know about this one. I know I told you about this one until I read it. So it's very interesting. Okay, so that's the first part of the story. Let's continue. It's going to get even more interesting, more extreme. Hava ha'u gavra dahava da'are chiti lepischa. There was a person with him who was transporting wheat for Pesach, meaning to make matzahs. He was bringing the raw materials to make matzahs. Excellent. So basically, he's also on a mitzvah kind of mission. Not necessarily a unique one like the freeing of hostages. That's a particularly unique mitzvah, but he's also on a very important mitzvah mission, and he's traveling along with Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, and he has been left on the other side of the river. So let's see what's going to happen now. So Amarle, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, calls back to the river and says, Chalok lei, you should split for him. Nami also lahai de b'mitzvah asik, because this person is involved in a mitzvah. You should split for him because he's involved in a mitzvah, and his mitzvah should take precedence. And Chalakle and the river indeed split. So we had 2 in the written Torah, and now we've got 2 in the oral Torah already. Continuing the story, we have a third traveler. It says Havahahu Taya de Lava Bahadayu. They had an Arab businessman who was traveling with them as well. So we have three people. So this person is obviously not traveling for a particular mitzvah purpose, but he's traveling for business, for commerce, which is an interesting kind of thing. It's a worldly endeavor, but it's nevertheless quite an interesting endeavor. Nevertheless, so that's what he's doing. So Amarle, so Pinchas ben Yair again calls back. He says, Chalot le'nami, split for him too, lahai for him, delo lema kach osim livnei levaya, so that they won't say that's what you do for people who accompany others. Meaning, if it were to be that the river didn't split and this third party had been left behind, there would be some kind of claim of perception against the river. Say, oh, that's how you treat people who accompany other people, to leave them behind. So again, amazingly, halakle. So the river splits. So far, I'm just realizing that the oral Torah, I didn't really realize this, the oral Torah is winning, meaning there's two unbelievable, colossal miracles which took our greatest of our prophets, Moses and Joshua, in order to split the river. And Reb Pinchas ben Yair has just done it 1, 2, 3 times. Seemingly not. The first time was a little tough. He had a bit of negotiation. And then the second 2 times was quite quick.
The same time span.
Yeah. So there you go. So that is the third part of the story. And then there is, so this is in many ways is the main bulk of the story. It's really what we've just read. There's one which is kind of like, it's not a sequel. What's the, is an epilogue a word where you have like a bit at the end? I'm thinking like book terms or movie terms, but there's a last part of this story which is a little bit not symmetrical to that which came before, because they're now over the other side of the river. So let's see what happens. So Iklu lahalu ushpiza. So they go to stay in an inn, in a guest house. So Ramalei Sa'ari lachamri. So they had a donkey with him, that's the donkey in the picture. He had a donkey with him, and the people of the guest house were so kind as to provide food for the donkey, specifically sa'are, which is barley, so'orim. So that's so he put barley for the donkey. I understand that's what donkeys eat. But lo achal, but the donkey didn't want to eat it. There was something about it which he wasn't happy about. Chatvinu lo achal, nakrinu lo achal. They kept trying to process the barley in different ways so that it would be more edible for the donkey, and he just wasn't interested. So it seems like we thought maybe he was a fine dining donkey who would want his barley in a particular way, but that didn't work either. So he's not a fine dining donkey. So what's going on? So Amarlahu, Reb Pinchas ben Yair interjects, and he says, did you think about this? Dilma loma asran. Did you make sure to take tithes from the produce before you tried to feed it to the donkey? Now, this is an interesting question, because as far as I'm aware, that's not an obligation. As far as I'm aware, to feed your animal, to eat yourself, you have to take tithes from your produce, and there's all kinds of different rules, but in general, that's a rule. As far as I'm aware, there's no such rule for donkeys. As far as I'm aware, might be wrong, but it's certainly perplexing that this donkey is not a fine dining donkey, but Reb Pinchas ben Yair is suggesting he's a religious donkey. That he has a. And so let's see, he says that Asrinu, they did tithe it, va'achal, and he ate. So he was right. So he was right in the end. So we have basically the story, and I've kind of put it in bold there. We really have 4 characters in this story. We have Reb Pinchas ben Yair, we have the matzah traveler, we have the business traveler, we have the river, and of course we have the donkey at the end as well. So this is our story. So before we go forward, what on earth can one say about such a story? What do you think about this story? Any comments, any questions, any things that you want to know or you want to say about this story?
Talmudic stories are always a little bit of,
Yeah.
they're not always based on reality. They are sometimes to teach us something, and or it's just sometimes just a good story.
Yeah. So this is what I wanted to ask you, or you're kind of hitting at, is this story literal or not literal? Sorry. Yeah, I mean that. Meaning, like, is this story to be taken literally, or is it a metaphor for something?
No, it's a metaphor.
Or both?
It's not literal.
You think it's a metaphor? Okay, so if that's true, then I can't say my thing about the oral Torah winning over the written Torah, because if it's a metaphor, then it's true. Okay, there's a story about a sea splitting, but it was more maybe to teach us a lesson rather than to account a historical thing, which in the written Torah it really is accounting history. It's also doing many other deep things, but it does have a historical basis. So if that's true, then so then I can't use my line, but yeah, it could. So it could be. What do you think, Brian? Literal or metaphorical?
I want your line to stay alive somehow.
Yeah, so you're going for the other side for the sake of the
Like,
competition. Okay.
Keep the possibility
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah, so let's keep. So we've got two there, and we'll see. So we have in theory both possibilities exist for the record. So as I was kind of alluding to over there, so the Ramban, there's this idea of in Mikra Yotze Midei Pshuto, that there's a principle that Mikra, meaning Tanakh, the written Torah. So what it says there is always true on a literal level. Now it's also true on sometimes a metaphorical level, sometimes a spiritual level, almost always a spiritual level. But when you read something in the Torah, it did actually happen. You don't necessarily have that same rule for the oral Torah, just because when something is written in the Chumash or whatever in the Tanakh, it necessarily relates to something which actually happened. You don't necessarily have that rule. So both possibilities, it doesn't mean it's definitely a metaphor, but it could be either. It could be either.
So can I just say at this point that I thought I read that Rabbi Sachs once said that if it can be scientifically explained, then it did happen. And if it isn't, it could be a metaphor for it. Have I got it right?
You're right. Rabbi Sachs did say that. I don't understand what he meant. Unfortunately, we can't ask him because he's passed away, but I'm sure there's a bunch of Rabbi Sachs scholars, so I'm sure someone can tell me. Rabbi Sachs said this line is interesting. Sorry, the line, basically, Rabbi Sachs, he had a very interesting kind of public conversation dialogue with Richard Dawkins, who's a famous atheist, and he said that there's this rule. Rabbi Sachs said that there's this rule that if something in the written Torah, even in the written Torah, fits with science, then it is to be taken literally. If something doesn't fit with science, it is to be taken metaphorically. That's what he said. I just don't know how that fits with the idea of Ein Mikra Yotze Midei Pshuto. So, not sure what to say. So, yeah, you can take that if you want. Rabbi Sachs is good authority. I understand the general rule is not that way, but you're 100% right. That's exactly what Rabbi Sachs said. So that's more about. But either way, here we're in the oral Torah, so both possibilities certainly exist. So let's have a little look. Now we're going to read from the Maharal of Prague, who, if I recall correctly, lived about. He lived about 500 years ago. He was in the 16th century, if I recall correctly. Is that right? So he was obviously in Prague, and he made certain unbelievable revolutions in the way that we learn Torah. So let's even just read his first line to kind of give an introduction to his own style. He says as follows in this box over here. So he says, "Mina devarim haniglim v'anirim shehama hazeh yesh bo sitrei chochma." From the words which are revealed and apparent in this, he's now making a commentary on the above story. So in this story, there are secrets of wisdom. So this is a very Maharalian approach. And the Maharal always takes the approach that anything that the sages are teaching you is extremely deep. They don't tell you little, small, interesting children's stories. In fact, they obviously do tell you, I mean, we just read something like, they do tell you things which are often bizarre and surprising. But that is a clue that the thing that they're actually trying to teach you is very, very deep. So when they want to teach you a particularly deep thing, they won't just say it to you, they'll hide it in a story or something like this, such that it's up to us to decode the story and gain that wisdom, and it won't just be apparent to anyone who's just thumbing through reading. It's only there for those who are ready to put in the effort and engage with the Masorah, with the tradition, to have those secrets revealed to them. So that's basically what he's going to do over here. He's going to tell us that this story reveals many secrets to us. So the first part of the story he interprets as follows. Da, ki klal habriot heim al surat Adam prati. All of the creations, all of the created things, they are in the form of the individual human being. So that means that if you want to learn about the world, you can learn about yourself. And if you learn about yourself, you'll end up knowing about the world. And if you want to know about yourself, you can do the reverse as well. So you can know everything that you learn about the world can teach you about yourself, and everything that you learn about yourself can teach you about the world because you're on the same model as each other. So it's very interesting. So v'davar zeh mavur, and this thing is explained. U'kamo sheba'adam prati timsa shlosha kochot. So this is the first key. There's inside every human being, we have three kochot, three forces, as he calls them. So we'll use first his terminology, and then we may simplify it a bit towards the end. So what are these three forces inside us? They are non-physical forces. In other words, they are spiritual forces. These are different parts. There are going to be three different parts, main parts of our spiritual makeup. This is how the Maharal is going to talk about it. He says, "Echad hu haseichel sheba adam." The first force inside you is your seichel. This is your mind, your intellect. So this is the first non-physical, you can call it spiritual force that you have inside you. In many ways, it's kind of like the highest thing that you have to you. This is your seichel, your intellect. That's the first one. The second one, hakoach hasheni, lamata mizeh, it's below this. It's koach nafshi eloki. It's a force which is personal and also godly. V'im she'eno seichel, it's, even though it's not intellect, hu koach nafshi nivdal min hachomer, it's still nevertheless something which is personal and removed from physicality. So the second force is kind of a tricky one. It's like, it's not like quite intellect, but it's something which is still godly in some way. The third force that you have inside you, koach nafshi, it's also a personal thing. Aval eno nivdal min haguf, but it's not really separate from the body. That's what he says. Va'al dvarim elu yesh rayot berurat ein kan makom lekatvan. And it's all this stuff that I just told you. I have many rayos, I have many pieces of evidence for this, but this is not the place to write them. That's what he says. So it's always interesting when the Maharal does that. I still have an idea. If anyone has time on their hands, I think it'd be a cool masters to do. Because Maharal says stuff like this all the time. He says, I have lots of proofs, but now's not the time to talk about them. Where sometimes he says, this will be understood by people who understand wisdom. And he has these catchphrases of when he ends off a piece. And I wonder what each of them means, what each of them refers to. Why did he say it? If he's not going to either say you have evidence and then bring the evidence, or just don't say it. Say, I have evidence, but I'm not telling you. So what's he doing? But he has all kinds of turns of phrase like that. So it's very interesting. So this is the interpretation of the first part of the story. I see that the Zoom is actually in line with this board, so I'm going to utilize this whiteboard a little bit to give us the first stage of the story. So the first stage of the story is as follows. He's just told us we have a person. It's kind of visible, not really. Don't worry, guys. We have a person. And they have three parts to them. They have the neshama, or the seichel. They have the ruach, which is this middle thing, and they have the nefesh. Excuse me. They have the nefesh. So this is basically what the Maharal just said to us. So in other words, I'll have to do a good job of describing it for the Zoom audience. It's actually not as clear as I hoped it would be, even though you are in firing line of the whiteboard. But basically, what the Maharal just said to us is that these three characters in the story are the three parts of yourself. They're the three parts of your soul specifically. You have three main parts to your soul. There are more, maybe we'll get into it, but the Maharal really just focuses on the three main ones, which are the highest part of your soul that you mostly have access to, which is something called your neshama. That is the spirituality behind your mind and your intellect. So when you're thinking and you're analyzing and all that, so it is your neshama that you're using to do that. Then you come down and you are dealing more in your emotional life. So that's something which it's godly, it's above, it's not like physicality, but it's still personal. It's something which is a little bit less than intellect, because when you're dealing with your emotions, so then you're not always necessarily doing the thing which is the most logical thing. On the other hand, emotions are a very high thing, and kind of are something which in many ways are special to who we are. The main way that we live our life is really kind of through emotions. What we identify with is kind of what we emotionally identify with more than necessarily what we just intellectually think is a good idea. It's more what we feel that we have a closeness to, or something like that. So anyway, so that's this second part of us, which is called the ruach, which is this intermediate part of our spirituality, which relates to our emotions and our character and our kind of main engagement in the world. And then we have this third level, which is called our nefesh, which he use a very interesting way to describe this. He says it's part of you, it's part of your spirituality. It's not chomri, it's not physical, it's part of your spirituality, but it relates very strongly to your body. So what does that mean for us? What that means is that you have a part of your soul which gives you the ability to do physical actions. So we walk around the world, we walk and we move. Oh, wow. Brilliant. We just had one from the Zoom audience just come into the live room. That's fantastic. Yeah, now you can see the board. Okay. Anyone else is welcome to travel from Scotland if they wish. So we basically have these three parts of us, these three main parts of our soul. When we're thinking and trying to understand what on earth is going on in Pinchas ben Yair's story, for example, so we are using our neshama. When we are feeling and we are relating to other people in that sense, or we are using our character in the world, we are also speaking, by the way, relates to this. Our speech is that intermediate part of us, which is not intellectual, it's not physicality. So when we're speaking as well, we're using our ruach. And in the third level of our soul, we have our nefesh, which is the spirituality behind our physical actions, so the way that I'm able to now do all these hand gestures and the likes, which I like to do. So that's because of my nefesh that I'm able to do that. So this is these are the three first characters in the story. These are the three travelers. That's basically what the Maharal is telling us, is that we have Rav Pinchas ben Yair. He is the neshama. We'll elaborate on how. We have the Matzah traveler. He is the ruach. He's that part of the emotional spirituality. And then you have the businessman, who is like the physical of the spirituality, or the spiritual and physical. Yeah, what do you think, Brian?
In my desire to keep your thought alive of
Yeah.
orientation being at least on
Yeah.
the level. So I think the written has some advantage still, because I guess maybe because some of the other shiurim that we do, this is reminding me a little bit about Pardes.
Mm-hmm.
And that the Hamor is like the Nahash, and the river and the place you were talking about, Gan, it was kind of like Gan Eden, Nahar. But that
Interesting.
Pinchas did a seemingly bigger miracle with the river, but he wasn't able to fully make it to Pardes exactly like other rabbis.
That's interesting. Yeah. So we don't really know. Yeah, whilst he was doing a big miracle, as you're saying, in the physical world, he didn't necessarily transport to a spiritual realm as a result of it, or something like that. He was still just getting to another part of the physical world. So I see there's two.
Close or something.
Yeah. So it could be, yeah, it's interesting to know that there's these four. We'll come more also to the chamor, to the donkey soon as well. But this is really the first thing that we want to get from the story, is that we have a soul and we have parts to our soul, and these three individuals are really representing those parts. It doesn't at this stage, we don't know yet still that it's not literal. We know it's definitely metaphorical. Question is, could it be both? So that's an interesting idea. Meaning it's definitely teaching us something. That's what the Maharal's pushing here, is that these individuals represent parts of the soul. But it's the door is still open for it to also be literal, but it's certainly also teaching you a lesson, or many lessons. So you want to say something? Okay.
Just talked about another Kubo story.
Another?
Yeah, with Rabbi Eliezer.
Yes.
When he
Oh,
tries to
yeah.
make a point,
Interesting.
make a river flow.
Flow backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, flow backwards. Yeah, there was such another story in
Nothing
Tanakh.
to do with
Yeah, he
it.
does all kinds of miracles. He's a very interesting person, Rabbi Eliezer. So this is the first part of the story. This is about the soul. Let me just say how each one refers to each level of the soul. Why do these three travelers refer to each one? So you have Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. What he's doing is he is releasing hostages. He's freeing hostages. What does it mean to free hostages? What it means is to bring someone from darkness into light. An existence of a hostage is an existence of darkness. That is the place that person is in, sometimes physically, but certainly conceptually. And to free such a person is to bring them to light.
Has he been drawn on?
I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good question. It's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. You could have. There's many very positive statements in the Torah and different writings about the importance of freeing hostages. So yeah, he would be one, but and there are others. There are others too. So that's one. So why does that relate to the mind? Because the job of the intellect is to bring matters from darkness to light. It's to become enlightened. It's to take something which is not understood, which conceptually is in the darkness, and to bring light to the matter and to be able to understand that thing. So in that sense, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair is representing the intellect, this highest part of your spirituality, because the physical act that he's doing corresponds to the non-physical act that we do when we try to understand something. So that's that first level. The next level we have is the matzah guy. So he's going to do a mitzvah. Now, most mitzvahs, so as we mentioned, freeing hostages, it has certain unique elements. But in general, the mitzvahs relate to the heart. They relate to the emotions. They are something that in the ideal world we would do with all our hearts, with all our emotions. And I think we mentioned this in one of the other shiurim about prayer is Rahman al-Libabai. The Zohar says God wants your heart. That's what God wants from you. He really wants your heart. So that's the ideal is that when we are doing our mitzvot, when we're doing our religious acts, that they should be done with our hearts. And so that's why this person who's going to do a mitzvah relates to this intermediate part of our existence, which relates to the emotions, which relates to the heart. And then thirdly, we have the nefesh, the spirituality behind the physicality, which is the businessman. So he's very interesting because if you think about it, what does it mean to be involved in business or commerce or something like that? It's quite interesting because on the one hand, the matters that you're dealing with are very practical, very pragmatic, physical stuff. It's not a mitzvah. It's dealing with that. On the other hand, in order to do so, you certainly have to draw on something beyond your physical energies, because if it was just up to your body, you wouldn't be able to put in all that effort and to have all that drive in order to do what it takes to be successful in business or in other even practical physical endeavors. So I think a lot about when I think about this, I think about athletes, or even just anyone who's just doing any exercise. So an exercise, I think doing exercise is a very good way to work your nefesh muscles, because your nefesh is the spirituality of your physicality. So in that sense, it's relating to the physical realm, but it's the thing which is driving you forward and to telling you to not be lazy, but rather use your physicality in this kind of spiritual way to uplift your physicality. So it's very interesting. So that's like the businessman in the story. So that's why these three individuals relate to our three levels of our soul. Now, what is the river doing? So that's going to be the next part of the Maharal. So let's have a look. So v'achomri ba'adam, he says the physicality in the person, haprati, hu monea lekochat hanafshim, shelo yimtzu b'shlemut ma'alatam. The physicality inside you. Now he's not talking about the nefesh. The actual physicality inside you, i.e., your body. What does that do? It tries to prevent you from reaching completion and reaching high spiritual levels. ודבר זה ידוע, כי החומר הוא שמונע השכל, שלא יימצא בפועל לגמרי. And it's known, he said, that the physicality inside you prevents you, is kind of holding back your intellect so that it won't come completely to fruition. וכן מונע כוח נפשי הנבדל, אף הוא נבדל מן החומר, אף ki hu nivdal min hachomer, and it's also holding back this middle part of your spirituality, which we're calling your ruach, your kind of emotional part of your spirituality. Umikom makom kevan shekoach nafshi nivdal ima adam monei chomri shelo yimsa koach hanafshi eloki b'shleimut legamrei. It's true, it's not intellect. It's still kind of something which is a little bit lower in some ways, but it still has a battle with the body. The body still wants that not to be doing its best, and the spiritual, your ruach, wants your emotional life to be doing its best. And then he says, "V'chein hu monei lekoach nafshi abilti nivdal," and even your body is even going against the what we're calling your nefesh, which is the part of your spirituality, which is together with the body. So, in other words, basically what we have here, in a very, very general sense, is a tension between the body and the soul. Is that, in general, the body is wanting to keep you down here. The soul is wanting to bring you up. And so basically every time that you are thinking about doing something, then there's a pull in both directions. So what, in the terms of the Maharal, where is that pull coming from? So the thing which wants you to go and self-actualize and grow and learn new things and broaden your horizons, that is the soul and different parts of the soul. The thing which wants you to stay like you are, don't change, don't grow, stay in bed, even after 8 hours of sleep, stay in bed, and so where's that voice coming from? It's not necessarily a voice, but meaning where's that pull coming from? It's coming from your body. So it's an interesting thing. So we discussed the body last time, and the body has many, many advantages to it. And we do ultimately have a partnership between the body and the soul, but just in and of itself, the voice, so to speak, of the body is that which is kind of keeping you in the world. The body's from this world, so the body wants to keep you here, whereas the soul wants you to rise. And so you have a tension whenever you want to do these things on any of these levels. So that is the 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth character in the story is the river, which is the human body. So I'll do for the benefit of we've got here the body. So this was the river in the story. Why is a river a body, or why is a body a physicality and river? Why are those things going together? They're going together because at least a way we can understand those things go together is because water, interestingly enough, so water is life, but it's physical life, meaning there's such a thing as spiritual life, which could exist even without water. But your body is made up, I think it's certainly majority water. I can't remember what the exact percentage is, but the biggest single ingredient in your physical body is water. In a philosophical sense, the Maharal explains that there's something called form and matter. There's surah and chomer, and the form of something always relates to its spirituality, because the form is like the form something takes on relates to its purpose. So that's kind of always like its spirituality. And then the chomer, the materiality of that thing relates to its physicality. So I'm made up of carbon, hydrogen, like nitrogen and oxygen. So that's my physicality. I share that physicality with all kind of things, but because it's in the form that it is in a human being, so that gives me my purpose. Water is basically what is as close as you can get to formless matter within this world. It's something which is like pure physical, because it doesn't really have a form. It takes on whatever form you put it in, so it's fluid in that sense, and so that in that sense represents physicality, because it's kind of like the raw ingredient. The form is like the purpose, but it doesn't really have an inherent purpose. So it's interesting. So it relates to life, and it relates to all kinds of things in the bigger picture, but just in isolation. So actually it's going to relate to physicality, and that is why in our story we have the 3 human beings, which are relating to parts of your soul, and then we have the river, the water, which is relating to your body, because that's the physicality. And we have, as you can see, a conversation happening between the 2 of those. That's exactly what we have every single day, is we have a conversation between body and soul, between the body and the different parts of our soul, for that matter. So this is the 4th character in the story. So let's see the 5th character. So the 5th character says as follows, or the Maharal says about the 5th character as follows. It says, Af, Eitzel Chamor. We're now back to the donkey. We've returned to the donkey. And as far as we were aware in our assessment of this donkey so far, he is a religious donkey. He is not prepared to eat that which is not fitting with his ritual practices.
Yeah.
So let's see if that's going to remain true in the end. So Za'af Eitzel HaChamor, even regarding the donkey, Shehu Chomri, it's a physical thing. Ve'ein mitzido ra choshech v'lo or. It only has darkness to it. It doesn't have light, meaning it's not a spiritual entity. It's a physical entity, a donkey. However, mitzad shehaya mitzaref el Rebbe Pinchas ben Yair, from the perspective that it joins together with Rebbe Pinchas ben Yair, because it was owned by him. So it's joined together with him. Lo haya rotze le'echol tevalim, from the fact of its relationship to its owner, to this Rebbe Pinchas ben Yair, that's the reason it didn't want to eat the untithed produce, because not of itself, but because of a relationship it had to its owner. He says, Ki davar zeh lo shaykh b'madregat Rebbe Pinchas ben Yair, because eating that kind of produce didn't make sense for someone on the level of Rebbe Pinchas ben Yair. So a very interesting thing has just happened. We moved past the religious donkey idea. He's not a religious donkey. He's not a magical donkey. He's not a talking donkey, even though those things may exist both in Tanakh and in movies. But he is not one of those.
This week's Passion.
Or in this week's, yeah. Oh, yeah, we got there. Yeah, well done. So this is a perfect comparison. So we'll compare and contrast. If anyone wants to tell you, oh, this donkey is like Bilam's donkey in the Parsha, so you can say, actually, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Because Bilam's donkey seemed to be some kind of magical donkey, which was speaking, at least in that particular time. This donkey is a normal donkey. But basically, here's what the Maharal is telling us, and this is kind of the big idea of the day in many ways, is that your existence, not only you have a soul and you have a body, but your existence doesn't stop with your body. Your existence projects out into the world and encompasses also your possessions. That's basically what we're learning here. And so, in as much as this donkey, normal donkey, but in as much as it was owned by Rav Pinchas ben Yair, it was a possession of this holy rabbi. So it started to take on the characteristics automatically of this individual, of its owner.
Makes sense, because the rabbi has a kosher kitchen, so to say.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have treif in the house.
Yeah. So you're saying in terms of him, what he would be used to.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's one way you could say it. So that's what you could say is he wouldn't be used to that kind of thing. So that's one way you could say it. Another way you could say it is it's in the metaphysics of it. It's not necessarily whether he had been habituated towards it or not would be one thing. But what the interesting thing which would come out of this would be that, let's say Rav Pinchas ben Yair bought a new donkey today, and it had not been habituated with him. According to the Maharal, it's the connection itself which produced this characteristic in the donkey. So basically, this is the fascinating thing. So it could be that this idea of, you want, actually it's a novel idea, so it's worth dwelling on for a second, but we want our spirituality not to just remain inside, but also to be expressed in our physicality and in our physical lives. That's the dream. If you can live your soul, if you can make your soul fitting with your body, or vice versa with your body, and we're seeing here, it doesn't even stop there. To even have the dream would be that even your possessions will start to act like you in a certain way. So it's very interesting. But I think let's just say one thing about this, which is, and there's a source at the end here. You can take a look yourself, but that's talking about how there could be multiple layers of possessions and different layers where you can find a relationship between the person and things which are outside of them. By the end of the day, all of them are really about your possessions. So let's think about this. It makes for quite a different relationship with one's possessions. It makes for, so I don't know if you can have any thoughts. Here's some thoughts of it, some differences it makes for me. What does it mean to, let's say, to waste something or to throw something away? Throw something away all of a sudden is not so simple. That was part of you. That was something which was part of you. Now, it doesn't mean there's not a time and a place. You cut your hair, you cut your nails, we do kind of, as it were, shave off parts of our external existence. But to do so just kind of with no thought whatsoever, it doesn't make so much sense. So you find sometimes characters in the Torah, like Yaakov, I don't know if anyone knows, there's this whole story that Yaakov is also about a river, and I think he went over it, and then he crossed back over the river because he forgot some little possessions, little tiny things on the other side. He would have been fine, but why did he have such an attachment to his possessions? So if you realize that your possessions are really a part of you, then you're not going to be so so easy to just throw them away. On the other hand, there's something called giving. There's something called tzedakah. There's something called sharing what you have with others. And that has taken on a whole new meaning as well. Because now what does it mean to give? It means to give of yourself. Every single time you give, it means to give of yourself. So it creates a new perspective.
Up yourself that can be replenished.
Yeah, so it could be replenished. That's interesting about the nails and the hair replenishes. Money, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, we make
I mean,
money every
it
month.
certainly could be. Yeah, if you're doing well, you make money every month. But yeah, it certainly can be replenished for sure. In fact, even in a spiritual sense, maybe it does get replenished because God says that that's one of the things. If you give charity, then you get rich. It's an interesting thing. So maybe that specifically is a good example. But it's a different game. So to kind of like to give to someone without a second thought as to who they are, let's say, or something like that, or it's not a bad thing. You're still giving to them. Don't get me wrong, but you see that you just did an organ transplant to them. You just gave something of yourself to them. So it kind of makes sense that this thing is creating a relationship. So the idea of giving now is now all about creating relationships.
Yeah.
And the idea of caring about your stuff is not just about ecology, but it's even about just thinking about yourself and taking care of yourself in a certain way. So it's things like that. So anyone got any other thoughts of like this game-changing idea that even your possessions are a part of yourself?
I think a lot of people struggle to give things away.
Yeah.
And
It's
for
very,
those of us
very hard.
that hoard,
Yeah, so that's why
That's even more.
that's why I brought up the giving thing, because I'm not necessarily advocating for hoarding, but you might see why that is happening on it's an unhealthy expression. But what's it an unhealthy expression of is holding on. Why would someone want to say goodbye to parts of themselves? And so you see, it's actually I don't know if anyone knows about this, but I heard it's like very damaging to just like clear out a hoarder's house. I don't know if you ever heard that.
Damaging.
Is that correct?
Damaging to who?
Joe wanted to say something.
Oh, I was just thinking that I'm looking at it from a slightly different perspective.
Okay.
That if we are talking about giving things away or getting rid of them, but also it makes you think twice before you get anything, if you are going to build a relationship with this
Yeah.
object or animal.
Yeah, 100%. So that's the other angle, which is worth bringing in as well.
Unless you're a collector.
Well, there you go. So yeah, so that's another point. So a collector is kind of like, we can work out
Acquire
with.
things, but with the idea not to give it away.
Yeah, and that can relate also to what Joe's bringing up. It's a new idea of what it means to receive something, or to receive a gift, or even to purchase something, or even to find something on the street. To find something on the street, let's say it's not someone else's, let's say, but it was just something which is ownerless. So it's a little bit like adoption. You just took something which was ownerless and you gave it, you elevated its existence to become a part of you. So it's a whole
Meaning.
yeah. So it makes you think in terms of receiving. So now here's another point, which just thinking about what Joe is saying. So there's always this question of like, would you receive money? Let's say that you've got a charity which always needs money. You need new fundraising every year, right? And then someone comes and they're willing to donate tons of money to you, but you're skeptical about the source of their money or the character of the individual.
Yeah.
So typically I would have always just said, okay, but the money is the money and the money will do charitable work and let's just get over it. But if you think about that, then are you inheriting something? Are you inheriting some characteristics together with that? Or maybe rather more what Joe is saying, I think, is that you're forging a relationship. Forging a relationship with the individual. Hi, Eric. You're forging a relationship with that individual. So it's you think about our giving, receiving, and our ownership. Yeah.
Especially when you get big amounts of money, you have to know where the money comes from.
Yeah.
Of course, you will create a relationship.
Yeah.
If it's ill-gotten money,
Yeah.
then you are part of it.
Yeah.
Even if the money is used for mitzvah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I know we know a charity in South Africa. They're a very, very remarkable, amazing charity, and they refuse to get money from the government long story short, basically because the government's totally corrupt, and there's details to this story as well, but they refuse to get money from the government, so they struggle for money to charity, but that's one thing they won't do. And it kind of like relates to what we're saying here. So we've just been discussing this idea of how our possessions are a part of us. So it's a bit of a game changer. We talked last time a bit about relating to our bodies and thinking about how we have a relationship with our bodies. Now we're thinking about the relationship to the parts of us which are even outside of our bodies, which are our possessions, those things that we own. And it makes us think about giving, makes us think about receiving, it makes us think about relationships in general with others that we have these dealings with, and also just with the property itself that we own. So this is a food for thought for the week. Yeah, you want to mention?
Well, it's interesting, because obviously you can't just walk into a hoarder's house and clear it out.
Yeah.
Because it is part of them and it's part of their condition.
Yeah.
So you don't work with people in that way. But also it's probably, and Shari might want to say more of this, I would have thought maybe an unhealthy part of the, and most of us are always trying to clear a bit because we think it's better for our mind.
That's another point as well. There's all kinds of studies which talk about clutter in your environment and clutter in your mind and your emotions even as a result. And according to this, we have a much deeper approach to understanding that it's not just that there's a psychological connection between your environment and your internal life. There's actually a metaphysical connection. You actually have a certain oneness with your house, for example, or your possessions. And in as much as those things are disorderly, so that can feed back to you, or vice versa. If a person is very orderly, it can feed forward, and you might find their personality reflected in their house, for example. So I think we're gonna pause it there for today. A lot of information, but we're really trying to think. We're certainly thinking about the different parts of our soul. We're even thinking about our body, and we're even thinking about parts of us which are outside of our physicality. They are parts of us which extend into the outside world, and so we have relationships and a certain unity with all kinds of things that we never knew before.
There's a
Okay.
clue.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Have a great night.